This is the Ed Non-Tech Podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranick. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located on Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Matthew Stranick, and I'm in Kamloops, British Columbia, on the traditional lands of Tk'emlúp-te-Secwépemc within Secwépemc-Ulu, the traditional and unceded territory of the Secwépemc people. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Ed Non-Tech Podcast. With you as ever, Dr. Doug Reed over on the other panel here, and myself, myself, Dr. Matt Stranick, with you. Been a couple of weeks actually since the last outing. We try and keep it on the weekly, but personal and perhaps other kinds of circumstances inserted themselves into life, which is what circumstances will sometimes do. So here we are. Last time we actually spoke, Doug, was around about the Victoria Day weekend. So I suppose, how's life been treating you since then, my friend?
Good. I finished some projects. I'm pretty happy.
Anything you want to summarize? Any of the projects are always interesting-ish.
Yeah, I built a cedar bench for my back entryway, and now my shoes live somewhere other than just randomly on the floor in the room.
Nice. Functional and cedar. That's it's got nice texture. It's got aesthetically pleasing, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's got a nice smell, and it's water resistant or like nature moisture resistant, so that's all good.
So you cut the wood for that yourself and pieced that together? Yeah. Wow. That's kudos. Kudos, man.
Thanks.
Yeah.
How about you? What do you got going on?
Yeah, well, I mean, just this and that. My grandfather on my mom's side passed away. He kind of right on the Victoria Day weekend, which I didn't actually find out until a day or two after, because he kind of took a fall, and within 5 days of being hospitalized, he passed away. But I mean, he was 90 years old. He was pretty afflicted at that point with Parkinson's, and he was really not of a lucid mind for pretty much the whole time that he ended up being in the hospital. So, without kind of, digging too far, into that, beyond that kind of detail, just suffice it to say, he had a great life. But, as somebody who was, part of my life, it just took a little while of processing and unpacking to just, make sure that I felt okay about it, which I do. Everybody in my family feels okay about it. Life is kind of moving on as it does. And besides that, just kind of job-ish stuff, which I'm sort of tempted to speak to a little bit, but I probably shouldn't. But just one thing, just one thing to say is that my kind of push, into LinkedIn lately has actually, it's more than just a gimmick at this point. I mean, it's still very much a gimmick in terms of getting people to look at our podcast mainly, but actually one of the people who interviewed me for a job that's looking really promising right now, like promising as in I'm probably at the third or fourth stage of interview, depending on how you look at it, is that this person actually described himself as enjoying the podcast a lot. And I was like, so you're still interested So I'm like, you're still interested in talking to me? And he was like, oh yeah, definitely. So he described it as entertaining and apparently, with some value in terms of what this person was looking for relative to a certain role. So,
right on.
Yeah, well, it's it's nice feedback is nice, but then feedback from people who are actually at a certain professional stature and looking in, I mean, that's pretty cool, right? I would say. I think that's kind of
oh yeah,
speaks well to the whole endeavor, really, including some of the timely topics which we have coming up here. You actually prepared 2 sets of topics.
Yep.
So, I mean, you asked me which one I would rather do, and I kind of voted my thing on it. But anything you want to speak to in terms of the one we're on to today, and/or the one that we didn't do?
So, what we're going to do is AI and education, the visual impact so far.
Okay.
That's where I want to go.
Yep.
And because it's a deep dive. And
yes,
I want to do a couple of deep dives because we did our original AI conversation months ago, like January or December. It was a while back.
Okay.
And I know we're still going to get to the tool chest chat. We'll do that at some point. So that's cool.
Sure. Fair enough.
And part of why I wanted to do the visual impact so far with AI and education is what you've been working on peripherally. Because I've seen a whole pile of wacky pictures.
Oh man, that's just like, I'll tell you, if you give me enough rope, I'll I don't know, I won't take that full metaphor, to where it wants to go, but I don't know, man. I haven't updated that particular thing in about a week now due to some of the reasons that I've just described. It's on my, I think you're referring to the Sad Dads of AI Facebook.
That's part of it, but you've done a lot more than that. You were sharing more than that a couple of weeks ago. So
I've discovered the endless potential for memes, and I've discovered as a avenue, if you will, into exploring, certain societal foibles and concerns in a way that I find humorous, which is important, and potentially, not without educational value. Again, my possible colleague who was, I spoke with about this role last week, he said, I've been looking at your social media, and I was like, oh no. He's like, no, it's really interesting. And I'm like, okay, if you say so, man, sir.
Yep.
But yeah, okay. Well, I mean, again, I just, recreational purposes first in that instance, and educational purposes second is what I'm gonna. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it, Doug. But I appreciate,
that ties back to what we did before when we talked about education and play and how important it is to give people a chance to play, because you've been playing and you look like you've been having a lot of fun. I think that's fair.
I am due to revisit my Sad Dads of EI, or I almost said Sad Dads of EI. That's a Freudian slip. For the Sad Dads of AI thing at some point in the next day or two, once I kind of get some other stuff off the blocks. Man. Social media, cultural narratives, and just as I was kind of looking at my Paulo Freire in preparation for this episode, one of the things that comes up in there is like, part of his problem that he describes with the so-called neoliberal perspective is that it encourages the left to kind of go to the center, which really means stepping to the right, in the interest of kind of garnering more political or popular support. Now, in terms of the e-learning, standpoint on this, one thing that I just kind of observed sort of semi-casually through LinkedIn and a little bit on Facebook and Instagram is the annual spring workshop of the Educational Technology Users Group, ETUG.
Yeah,
which is sort of a high-level subcommittee, basically, within the BC campus sort of framework, made up of largely ed techs, administrators, educators in the e-learning space in BC, so they had their spring symposium. It was the first, I think, since before the pandemic, where it was mainly in person. And one of the themes that I just kind of noticed while I was kind of just clicking around, making my rounds yesterday, whatever, is one of the things is designing for a future. What is it? I got it right in front of me. Future-proof learning design. That's what.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah.
And I'm just like, I don't know. Future-proof, because to me, education is fundamentally a future-engaged endeavor, right? And technology is, at least one of the reasons I got into this stuff is because it's, future-facing as well. So it's sort of like future, as a component of a future-facing enterprise. So future-proof. So like in this, yeah, go ahead.
I think it's not future-proof. I think it's evergreening proof. Like when you have to evergreen, like you build your product, you build your course, and then the time it takes to fix it at the end of every semester, at the end of every offering, that's the evergreening part. So I think they're trying to do that to make it easier without. But I don't know. I didn't like the term when I read.
I just without being party to it really at all. I just sort of snaggled on to something here in the free air as I make my way through it in dribs and drabs. Is that it really struck me as a phrase from page 19 of the actual thing, which is as far as I've gotten to in these months, is the deproblematization of the future, right?
Yep.
And to me, so that's something where, the left, in his usage of it, the left is sort of being co-opted by the right by just assuming the issues of the past are no longer the issues of the future. It's on to other things, right? To me, one of the, tenets, I think, of e-learning and whatnot is, one of the major, pedagogical areas that it owes to and draws from when it's doing its work well is, problem-based learning. That you know about problem-based learning. Maybe some of the people here, it's sort of learning by solving messy, ill-defined problems. And throughout my career, and even prior to my career as being an educator, that's just something I leaned into. I'm problematic, Doug, in lots of,
Thanks for that newsflash.
Yeah, right. Like from my habits as a student back in high school to my esoteric, possibly musical taste to my, weird tattoos and everything else. It's like, if it's clearly defined, then I'm probably not going to be the person who's the most engaged with it. So, again, not to cast shade on any, current or current, but any past colleagues with that. But again, just in terms of like the naming and in terms of just what kind of flashed through my mind just momentarily while I looked at it, I'm like, like, anyway, that's
and
a bit of a tangent there, but
and your whole problem-based learning thing,
that
your reference, I would go straight to action research because it's the same kind of thing. It's people doing something and it's like, oh man, how do I fix this, or how do I figure this out, or how did I get here, or how do I make sure I never get here again, in a very practical practitioner kind of sense.
Right, you build it from the ground up. You use sort of what's at hand. It sort of owes the constructivist notion, which we talked about before.
Oh yeah.
See more, prepare. Learning through play. sort of developing, things that suit in the moment, with its sort of aligned research methodologies, if you want to go there. Action research is one of them, which I, looked at for my doctoral work before kind of settling into the mixed, or the case study with some mixed method stuff that I got into.
Right.
Grounded theory, another, really legit, where, your, approach to the research is evolving based on what the research shows you. So it's sort of a evolving research design, which I think is suitable in education context, because education is a dynamic endeavor, right? Fundamentally.
Yep.
So
it better be. It better be. If it isn't, you've got another problem.
Well, and again, just kind of where we went with the last episode with the glorified Dropbox, kind of situation. I mean, that was a static kind of resource, which is kind of
or lobotomized wiki. It was either glorified Dropbox or lobotomized wiki. I don't want to go back.
You congratulated yourself after the recording ended yesterday or last time for not using that term, and I'm like, that's going to come up again. And I'm glad the tape was running this time, because anyway, Doug. Anyway, not to kind of go back on it, but I mean, but really, like a static kind of resource, even if the context is changing, still remains something that is, maybe future evasive, whereas our problems, I think, are of the future, and our, situations that we're trying to deal with are, necessarily in the future, and, preparing
some of them are in the present, like AI and how it's impacting like video and graphics. That's in the present. That's right now.
And there we go. And it's so, again, this is something where, if I can just speak to Marcus Aurelius, thinking like a Roman emperor, the person who wrote this book, actually, Donald Robertson. I didn't know this, actually. I read that he wrote a graphic novel about Marcus Aurelius, which I kind of, got into, a narrative account. So I'm like, oh, his, book version of that must be pretty slick. Turns out he's a cognitive therapist originally, by sort of, his original professional thing. And he speaks to, like, and again, just something that I was kind of thinking through today a little bit, is he speaks to, like, the concern about that therapists have, or that they try and address with their patients, is catastrophizing, right? So, like, imagining the worst possible scenario, right? And just kind of getting in a panic or a tizzy. And, as per Robertson and, his kind of take on both, Marcus Aurelius and his precursor, one of his precursors, Epictetus, how to be free. I thought that was pretty good, when we're talking about AI and the concern of, like, cognitive function. But, it's like, there's a lot of, I think, hyperbolic and catastrophizing kind of discourse around AI, particularly in the realm of education right now, and the way to, there he kind of, Robertson, he kind of refers to the Stoic, group over the centuries as having some kind of mental exercises in how to, get away from that. How to sort of acknowledge your fear as kind of being a first impression, but then separating yourself from that and actually being able to act in a way that is going to be helpful, rather than just kind of throwing up a bunch of smoke, so to speak, right? So
now, I'm going to sidetrack you with another whole thing. When I did my meditation instructor's course, the person that developed it and did a little bit of the teaching was 99 at the time, and he was a Buddhist monk named Lumpa.
99.
He was 99. He ended up passing away at 101, but he had spent more than 80 years studying meditation,
Wow.
And every time, the catastrophizing, I know I
Yep.
do it. I don't like it, but I do it. Maybe you don't. I certainly do.
In a lot of ways, I think I catastrophize my way out of a job, because
Yep.
I spent a lot of my time in my previous role thinking, oh man, what if I lose this role? What am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
And ultimately, it became a kind of that negative voicing, kind of became both a self-fulfilling prophecy in terms of what the result ended up being, but then as well, the point which Marcus and some of the others have kind of drawn to the fact that whatever you think is going to be the worst that could happen, I mean, that probably won't be the case. I mean, things are not good or bad, they just kind of exist as a thing within the universe, and really the only thing you can control is your own impressions of them. So catastrophizing unchecked fear, in a lot of cases.
And the word I'm going to use is hallucinating. Like Lumpa was Thai.
Okay.
And every time he said, when you're meditating and you're doing this and you're thinking about the bad stuff, he goes, why? Why are you hallucinating? That's not real. Why are you making that up in your head? That's not real. It's not helping. Why are you hallucinating? And I didn't like the way he used the word hallucinating initially, but I've thought about it a lot. And I'm like, that's exactly what
he might have been writing in his own original language, though, and that might just be the closest word that the translator had.
No. He liked the word hallucinating.
Okay.
He learned English to write the book that we used. And it was just everything you just described, I learned in my meditation practice as I was getting the instructor certification. It was, don't hallucinate. You don't have control over it. Control what you can control. Focus on what you could focus on. And it's all the stuff that Marcus Aurelius and the other Stoics address as well. It's still a modern thing.
I think there are some tenets of the human condition, right? Like that have stayed with us and kind of helped the species. So a lot of it's kind of a cliche. It's very much of a cliche, but to solve the problems of the future, a lot of the time, your best reference point is what worked in the past, what actually worked, in terms of, your approach to the thing. So and a lot of the time, so-called new approaches are really just kind of contemporary reframings or, visualizations, if you like, of things that were effective in the past, in some ways, right? So,
and that ties into the first article I want to share,
Sweet.
the Lieberman 96 Intelligent Graphics article. So this is 27 years ago, and Lieberman says, what makes the synergy between artificial intelligent graphics a new paradigm rather than a collection of techniques is that it fundamentally changes the way we view the interaction between people and computers. So 27 years ago, we were starting to engage with how the interaction is happening.
Right. And, I just kind of go from there a bit. It's like, regardless of how, the technology was kind of manifesting that, whatever that actually, consisted of, from a visual or kind of sensory level, the function, the cognitive purpose, the intention of it was already, manifest, right? So
yes, and we've matured,
right?
Like, did you ever see the movie Tron, like back in the 80s?
Oh yeah, and the reboot, yeah.
The movie Tron did not win the Oscar for best special effects because computers were cheating. They used computers, and that was cheating.
Wow, that's a neat pop culture anecdote, man. I'm just going to give you credit for that.
And now you take a look, right? Can you name a Marvel movie that isn't full of computer graphics, right? CGI. People know what computer graphics are now. Computer-generated images. So
and it's just
it's how we've interacted differently.
and it's reached the point now where it's just so. I mean, so many visions of what that could consist of, right? Like I'm thinking of Zuckerberg from Facebook and his like, you know, he's been really kind of pushing for, you know, quite a few years, this, you know, richest millennial on the planet, the notion of the metaverse, right? Like basically AI graphics, but, you know, with a headset, right? Like that, you know, vision of it. I read something on the Guardian, which through Facebook, go figure, you know, speaking to the fact that like the official, you know, quarterly kind of reports from Facebook, because they're a public company, have been emphasizing the metaverse because AI as a kind of paradigm has kind of supplanted it. In terms of, you know, what that, you know, how people are going to interact. So, you know, maybe Zuck was hoping to kind of, you know, because they bought like Oculus, right? The headset, the headwear company, they bought, you know, so like trying to monetize maybe the physical gear and kind of go about it that way. I mean, you know, do you remember Google Glass? Do you remember?
Yes.
Nobody. Yeah, I was going to say, because if you don't, that would be legit, because that was just something that they tried and then just, okay, we're discontinuing that line, you know, that product line. It's like, you know, people don't necessarily want a, you know, physical reframing of the gear. What they sort of are getting, what the development is, you know, an algorithm that, you know, can predict what you want before you want it, to the point that, you know, it's propaganda coming at you. And then, you know, B, just really sophisticated capability for two-dimensional and probably, you know, increasingly maybe three-dimensional renderings, but the two-dimensional for sure is where we're going now. And I am looking forward to our, you know, the episode about this that we do on narrative and chat, you know, a little bit more, because I'm an English nerd, and that's kind of, you know, but this is good too, this stuff right here, you know. So
if you ever read the book Ready Player One?
Saw the movie.
Oh no, the book is so much better. There's
probably
no comparison. It really is, but it takes a look the same way, like the Thoresen et al. 2004 Artificial Intelligence Computer Graphics.
Okay.
Right? It's the connection between graphics and AI is becoming increasingly strong.
Yes.
And Ready Player One is kind of where I think the metaverse wanted to go, where people put the goggles on and they're immersed in everything. And programming power can't do all that. AI would have to be making a bunch of that stuff up on the fly. And that merger hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, so maybe now, you know, where the development is kind of, you know, ramping up, or, you know, maybe it's already ramped up a lot, and it's just we're seeing the tip of the iceberg. That's probably, you know, more what it is. We may end up kind of looking back on this, you know, era as kind of just being a precursor, you know, to whatever the next, you know, kind of tangible shift in terms of how we experience the internet. Because I think now, you know, the notion is to experience the internet is, you know, just it's an extension of the public consciousness, you know, writ large, very much the same way that the printing press, you know, became, and what that kind of gave to the public's ability to not just produce and consume information, but how they perceive information, right? How you write the language that goes into your mind that forms your thoughts.
So I think it's coming. So even Thoresen, like 19 years ago, was saying, the virtual world part. And I think that's where the metaverse was going to go. I just don't think everybody else was ready for it yet. And I think AI has kind of pushed it up. And I think it's still going to be a thing, just not this year. I think in the future it will deal with it.
Well, it just, you know, if I'm being cynical about it, you know, you have so much computer engineering capability that is existed that exists in North America, and probably this is going to be just again because I've just finished reading 3 or 4 pages of free air. But I mean, a lot of the engineering, computer engineering, coding and whatnot, a lot of that's been outsourced to so-called developing nations. I'm thinking China and I'm thinking India, notably. So those are areas where, first of all, they have way less in terms of regulation, in terms of their work environments. And you have people who are much more motivated due to financial insecurity and scarcity to overperform relative to the overhead costs, right? So,
for sure.
That's
why they do it.
So it's like, you like your Nike shoes that are made in Vietnam, thanks, Air Jordan. you like your, Samsung phones that are sort of, built using like precious minerals from Africa and then comprised in, like some, sweatshop, basically, automated automated-ish in China somewhere. It's like, we like regulation for our, thing, but we don't want to give up an inch of the consumer, experience. So that, I dare say, neoliberal thought is just, it's manifesting in the ways that AI and anything else that's built on an algorithmic structure that we experience are coming into fruition. Sorry, bud, I cut you off.
No, you didn't, because I'm guilty of that. Like when I did my PhD, and I did my theoretical framework diagram. I went to a buddy of mine who was doing his PhD in English, actually, and he was a graphic designer. And I said, hey, can you show me how to use this software so I can design to make my theoretical framework image look good? And he's like, no. He goes, no, just give me that stuff. I'll do it. I'm like, no, I want to learn. He goes, I don't want to spend the time teaching you. He goes, it'll just be easier if you just give me the info and I do it for you. It'll take way less time. So and then he came back with a version. I'm like, no, that's not right. He goes, of course not. No client ever knows what they actually want. So it was what I did with that AI image software to come up with our logo. I went through all the free ones and I did hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of them to try to get that ENT logo to what it is. And when it finally came out of the blue, I sent it to you right away. I think I sent you like 5 of them, all different versions of the same kind of thing. But I didn't want to go hire somebody to do that. I just wanted to use the tools.
Well, I mean, you're perfectly legit. And let me say, I'm somebody who, I value, my T-shirts, made in underregulated countries as much as anybody. I mean, that's just, that's kind of a function of where we are now. But I'm in a situation where I might have to move cities for a job potentially. And I'm just kind of looking at it like, do I want to disassemble this furniture and put it on a truck and then ship it across the North American continent? Or do I just want to put up an ad on Kijiji and said, if you can get this out of my apartment, you can have it for free. And, besides my records and my book and maybe my computer, I think that's almost what I'm going to end up doing. It's like, because I can get this stuff at any, brick outlet anywhere in North America, because hooray for consumer culture,
We did almost the same thing when we moved from BC, the Okanagan, to PEI. Okay. It was, unless it had significant sentimental value.
Yep.
Or I had made it, but anything I made was like, I can bake that again. That's not a problem. So it was the sentimental value stuff we kept. Everything else went. It was the same thing. It was like I had to sell my boat, and I loved my boat, but it was going to cost at least twice what the boat was worth to ship it. So I sell the boat, make some money. I'll buy a new one or build a new one.
Do you have a new boat yet?
Not yet, but we'll get there. I just got the French cleats up in the entryway, so I'm getting there. I need all my tools out, so I'm not looking in Rubbermaid bins or whatever different tool it is. But yeah, we've had the same experience. We've had those same thought processes.
I appreciate where we've gone with this. And now, something about the AITA. Okay, this.
Yes.
The
so the
AITA.
The Holmes 2023 article is about artificial intelligence in graphics, and it's brand new. It's months old.
Right.
And so artificial intelligence TA, that's teacher's assistant.
Yep.
Right. So it's like, hey, I'm teaching a class. What do you got for me? And it pumps out. Oh, here's a bunch of images you can use. Here's some videos. Here's some augmented reality stuff that we can create, or I can go find for you. And it does so much of that research work, or it'll create what's needed.
Wow.
It's so helpful and so handy, but you need to know the right words to make the algorithm give you what you want. So there is still that skill set.
So it's something to do then with critical discernment, digital literacy of a sort, and curation, those 21st century, so-called 21st century skills, which they were talking about, in the late 90s. This actually sounds like, if I was a BEd candidate right now, this is something that I'd be looking at going, okay, this is going to be something that's going to be probably on the regular soon, right? So I would be sort of imploring or hoping that, those programs, the BEd training programs and MEd training programs, it's been a while since I've been involved in either, but that they would be able to take that into account and provide opportunities, safe opportunities for using this stuff.
Now, here's the trick.
Okay.
You and I have terminal degrees in ed tech, right?
We do.
And guess what? We're rare. So a whole lot of people in post-secondary doing this teaching, they did the COVID pivot, they did the pandemic pivot, and teaching online is not just plug that into the LMS and talk for 3 hours and record it and stuff. And the same thing is happening now. There's a whole lot of people in post-secondary freaking out. What do we do? How do we do this? What's going on?
They're catastrophizing an AI pivot. Do we get to trademark that term, AI pivot? Can we
Dude, it's $35. Get on it. I don't know what
the person who that nice person who kind of supported me in the interview process last week. I was like, well, we called it the ed non-tech because we figured if you did a Google search on ed tech, a bunch of things would come up. So he was like, I was like, so we kind of really wanted to differentiate it, even though we're talking largely about that kind of same stuff. And he was like, that's great, you should trademark that. And I'm like, well, I might have come up with the phrase, but it wouldn't, manifest if somebody who actually had, an active career at this point wasn't willing to step in and make it happen with their support and participation, right? Because, it's like, the unemployed dude's talking something, so.
It's not support. We're partners. We're doing this. That's how I see it.
It's being experienced by more people than just us. And like we kind of keep saying at this point, you never know what the unintended or unseen effects of stuff are. Which it's something you want to take into account. So the AI pivot, TM. I'm sure somebody else has already come up with that. Maybe they came up with that at ECOG. I don't know.
Well, we can find it.
we can find out, sure, if it's on Google Scholar, and it's peer reviewed, and if it's not, then it's up for grabs, quite frankly.
Yeah, let's do that.
We got moral dibs, if not proprietary ones. Anyway, sorry for that particular tangent as well.
No, but if you take a look, right, like we're looking at the images, right? Because I know we both played with it a whole bunch.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And we both come up with stuff, and we've had our own ideas. Because I'd like to think I can be kind of artistic, but I know real artists are different. Like they have skills that it blows me away.
Well, so what it is, I mean, in some senses, you could say, well, the AI, generators are kind of, creating, they're kind of democratizing, a certain area of visual arts. But then on the other hand, a real artist it's not just in the application, it's sort of in the mentality which drives the application, the thinking, the thought, the thing that wants to be expressed, is ultimately going to find a way to express itself. So, an artist, dabbling with AI is still, in my mind, an artist because they're bringing to it a mentality and a perspective that, so-called layperson, may not necessarily have. And you shouldn't, if you're feeling, anxiety or fear about, the uninitiated or the unqualified having access to a thing and doing things with it, then maybe what you need to do is check your own catastrophizing about it,
Yes.
and actually respond to it, somewhat objectively as much as anybody can, right? So
every sad dad or happy dad or whatever that goes to Home Depot or Lowe's or Rona or Kent or any of these hardware places, home hardware, they are grabbing tools and grabbing wood and doing stuff, right? And I've never heard a carpenter complain because I've mentioned that I made some furniture. I don't consider myself a furniture maker or a cabinet maker or a carpenter. I'm a person that just does that stuff. So artists are artists.
Or, people who are in the academic sphere. It's like if you're worried about, an algorithm being used to either entirely or in part, create or assist, an essay or some other, component, then it may just be that you have sort of got to reinvestigate your notion of what it is to be an academic and an educator, right?
Yes. Oh my God, that's absolutely it. If your essay can be completed by something, or if you give the students an art project, because we're talking about images today, and they use one of these services and they can do it, what you got to change your assessment. Like what's going on?
And I mean, not just respond to the perceived threat, but in a way that okay, I'm actually going to look at what this thing is, why people are using it, why my students are using it, and what about this can be used creatively or to engage those mental skills, those mental habits and practices within our respective disciplines, where this is coming from. So
this is why I love talking to you. You're just an educator. That you just said all the things I wanted to say, but you said them more articulately. So thank you.
I don't. I think I've got more time on my hands than you.
Maybe.
But as the case may be, just to speak to your notion or the really elegant metaphor you used in terms of the carpenter, or the the sad or unsad dad heading into the tool store. It's like that motivation to create something, articulated or not, verbally or not, it starts as some kind of visioning process, and some of us kind of, think more maybe, with words and those kind of codes, and others maybe think more, holistically, or in terms of images, or in terms of hybrid kind of formats. I mean, formats themselves are metaphors, right? The output is really just a representation, necessarily in terms of process and not just in terms of product, of, an impulse, right, that manifests. So again, I think, the people in the trades, trades educators, they are, like, it takes equal amounts of creativity to do that stuff well, and to teach that stuff well, as science or the arts, or whatever. So again, just my opinion there, but yeah. So and again, I just, AI as a tool within the broader kit, right? The broader media and pedagogical kit. Sorry, go ahead.
And that brings us to the Atte article. The usability of images generated by artificial intelligence.
Yep.
I believe that's a 2023 article in there. I don't know why I didn't include that number, but since it's not APA, it's okay.
I cleaned it up on the slide for APA.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem. You're the senior colleague, in terms of that stuff. So, anyways,
I'm the older colleague.
You're the older and employed colleague, and you've been at the stuff for longer. You did your doctorate before I did, so by all measures of seniority that exists within our thing, I appreciate the equality of the thing. But typically, the junior colleague proofreads the older, or senior colleague's manuscript. Anyway, a trite example, nevertheless. But Atte, right?
Yeah, like they talk about how the images coming out of these artificial intelligence options or services are quite good, right? So that means that the images being created can really be helpful in educational purposes. And it's basically summarizing what we've been saying now for whatever, 40 minutes or however long we've been talking.
Yep.
And it just brings home this is a real thing, people. We can't ignore it. It is not going away.
Well,
and to prove that it's not going away, one of the images I shared was the most popular websites in the world, and ChatGPT is like number 17 in the world.
I got two questions there, bud. I wonder if AI actually could have created that graphic.
Yes. Absolutely yes.
Yes. Okay. Very cool. And I forget what the other point was, actually.
Okay, we'll come back to it. That's fine. It's here. We got to deal with it. As educators, we do have to look out for that, right? We do have to look out for, did a person do this on their own, or did they get help? And is that a problem with what assessment and evaluations I'm doing? And that's going to be another whole topic.
Well, and I just sort of to touch on something, again, this is really more to do with ChatGPT, which isn't really the topic now, but it's, the general point. I shot you a link over from Clint Lalonde. He's the director for BC Campus, and it's about ChatGPT and open education. And one of the things, it's a blog post that he talks about. We put it on his LinkedIn, just like literally like 2 days. The blog post is dated 2 days ago, and it's It's about the implications for these products created by AI, or helped along with AI, in terms of like who has proprietary, which is to say intellectual property rights over that, because presumably the clear answer is the student, of course, but if corporations were to start saying, well, hold on a second, like they clicked on a user agreement statement, implicit or explicit, by using this tool, this service, and this service would not manifest as it does without our proprietary investment, right, in these tools. So what does the status of some of these things, what's the status of that as pieces of education, right? Of things that are, co-created in a sense with some of these tools. So, I mean, again, I don't want to go too much further than that. I don't want to, misquote or misrepresent what Clint was trying to say, but I just think like, okay, that's, an aspect of it that I hadn't necessarily given much thought to, being, that I'm sort of, I'm out of one institutional context and I'm waiting for the next, and I'm kind of out of the loop as far as that stuff in practice goes. But go ahead, bud.
Okay, let's go back to Photoshop then, because Photoshop is the last link that I shared with you.
Please do. Yeah.
If I created something in Photoshop, right,
Yep.
I went in and manipulated and gave the directions and did whatever,
Yep.
and I create an image, is that mine? Or does Adobe own it because Adobe's got Photoshop, right? Isn't that the same kind of argument that it's just, as soon as we get the law, nothing makes sense to me? Because do you remember it was a couple of years ago, somebody dropped a smartphone into, I don't know if it was monkeys or orangutans or somebody. It was a primate exhibit at a zoo, and the monkey figured out how to take pictures, or the primate figured out how to take pictures. Who owns that picture? Right? Or have you ever seen the one of the three pigeons where the camera's on the ground and the pigeons are pecking at it, and suddenly there's a picture of three pigeons over top of the lens, like it's like they're trying out for the cover of some weird new age band or something. Like, who owns that? If the pigeon pressed the button, like, is it Apple because it was an iPhone, or
given the opportunity to litigate anything, there's a whole stratum that exists that is just circling, right? So in terms of like open education, one of their mandates is to sort of keep things within the public domain, as BC Campus being an organization that kind of represents public, private as well, but all post-secondaries in BC, but the majority of those being public, right? So a public mandate, free of litigiousness, I suppose, such that e-texts, freely available e-texts become a thing, and again, there's a lot. I know I kind of make kind of somewhat disparaging remarks sometimes about the ed tech sphere in post-secondary generally, and sometimes specifically. But
fair enough.
There are some aspects of it, within the mandate and in the implementation, but definitely within the mandate, that I think are quite important. And anyway, just shout out to Clint and some of the work that they and BC Campus are doing, and not trying to kick the tide, not trying to cast too much shade with my previous comments about like future-proof design or whatnot, earlier. But anyways, Matt.
Yeah, that might have just been an editorial decision, or clickbait,
or it might be a concept that needed to be tried. And
for sure. It's a blog post, so
right, and so anyways,
and it worked. It got us talking. It got us thinking and talking, so it worked. Educationally, fantastic.
And again, like where we kind of went with our pretty, hyper-critical kind of discussion about a specific application the last go-round. I mean, it's like, at the very least, it stimulated a certain kind of discourse. It stimulated a certain level of creativity to take, our conversation and sort of construct a thing around it, and then put that into the public domain for further, engagement in whatever way, that we don't know about, because it's just we're two people and an internet connection, right? So it's all good stuff, man.
Now the Photoshop thing, Photoshop is adding some AI image creation technology to
and that's again a very cool blog post that you shared, and I actually did, junior colleague, track down the APA formatting for the blog post as opposed to the
Thanks,
hyperlink, which is, fine. It was a good starting point, but but the point you came up with there from that and the blog, it caused me to actually read the whole blog post and not just your little excerpt there. It's pretty good, man. It's like,
yeah.
Yeah.
But it also comes back to AI, like from our previous episode, like whatever, June or January 12th or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It was the user interface is ready now, right? Because these large language models aren't AI. That's a marketing term, but it's the large language models with a reasonable user interface that makes it easy for people. And when do we get to Star Trek, right? When do we get to, I'm not even going to use text, I'm just going to talk, and I'll get like Siri or Alexa or something to input that stuff from my words. It's like, no, it's too red, make that a little more green, or no, make that taller, and just have AI do it on the fly, right? That's what's coming. That I'd be shocked if that isn't what's coming.
I always thought, when I was a kid, when Star Trek: The Next Generation first came on the air, like back in 88 or 89 or whatever it was, I always thought the trope or the device of the holodeck was such a cool thing within that show. Like, they went in at the episode where like Picard and Data were like Sherlock Holmes and Watson, and it's like doing this completely. It's like that it's like Shakespeare's device of the stage within a stage, right? He did that a lot, having like the play going on within the play that people are observing. Midsummer Night's Dream comes to mind, but the contemporary, presentation of that on that show, it's like they're flying around on a spaceship, centuries in the future, endless space around them, and within that, they're, engaged in this completely three-dimensional, tactile simulation. So, I mean, Star Trek, a thing from the past, is going into people's minds that are developing this stuff and shaping, directly or indirectly, the outputs of this in some ways.
Yeah.
So
it's coming. We can't put our heads in the sand.
But it's already but it's already been here too. It's already been here. It's like it's like with AI music, right? I see some things in my Facebook feed, like Sting, just like poo-poos, the use of AI because it doesn't have soul or you can't dance to it, or but it's like people were saying the same kind of thing about rap music back in the 80s when it came out. It's like just talking, it's just beats and talking. What the hell is that? And it's like, oh well, that's the future, son. That's what.
But
so
Sting's 70 something. Right, like I'm not going to 70-year-olds for what I think the future of music should be.
Well, exactly. It just as a prominent individual, a prominent boomer, who's made their livelihood off of the thing. I mean, sorry, Sting, if you're listening to this, I saw you in my Facebook on Zuck's machine, poo-pooing the AI and. Haven't you ever listened to the Hippity Hoppity, friendo? But
and I'm not trying to dump on Sting because some of his music's great. But some of it I don't care for because there's not enough fiddles and there's no bagpipes. Right? We all have our own what we enjoy.
We do. We have our own preferences and our own picadillos, and we all have our preferred. Approaches as educators, our own preferred tech, our own perfect, thing about media. So if we can just sort of, again, put our catastrophizing aside, actually just sort of develop a good program of shared or self-study about, what these tools are, what their capabilities are, and actually do some, good old-fashioned Pro-D on it, hopefully, potentially with your friendly local teaching and learning center.
Nope, I refuse to call it Pro-D. I've only ever heard of that in 3 different towns, and they're all in the middle of BC. It's
Well,
professional
okay then.
development everywhere else in the world.
Fair enough. That's legit.
Sorry, I'm not trying
No,
to be
man.
difficult.
Terminology is shapes thinking, which shapes the results of thinking. So it's it might be a trifle, but trifles are what make up the universe, really. And pop culture predicts the future too. Let's not forget that.
Yes. One last thing I want to talk about is getting good at getting the pictures you want, because I've seen a couple of your sad dads of AI. So you must have done hundreds of things, and I shared some of the examples that I created when I was trying to come up with the Ed Tech logo.
Yep.
Right, like our little ent with the.
So you got some other iterations of that.
These are the other iterations. So go to
some website. Of which I find really damn charming, man. I'll tell you. Kind of the one that looks like a kind of a line drawing with the tree kind of growing out of the computer screen. I'm like, that's what AI probably wishes, if it were capable of wishing, what people would think of it. In a way, I'm organic, I'm helpful, I'm natural. Ish.
And what I came up with for our logo that I just love, if you change a word or two in the descriptors that you give to the AI engine, this is what you come up with. Like I would change a word or two here. So for listeners, go take a look at the website, and these are all the different things that AI created from almost identical text.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, so this is where, I mean, it just, if you're concerned about it, I mean, the best way to maybe alleviate some of your concern may just be to actually start trying it. Because just changing a few words here and there in a prompt, or even the sequence of those words, can drastically
changes everything.
Change the overall thing. And one thing that I like about the two products that I use, the Bing generator, and then the other one, the one that I pay for that I can't remember right now, but is that it actually spits out like 4 different variants from each one. So you kind of get your choice, and you can see a little bit, what the algorithm thinks you're trying to get at. I mean, not to give the algorithm, the thought, function, but just sort of as a shorthand way of describing what it does. It's really. It's just neat to see how it sort of represents certain stuff, right? It's in kind of just by a few changes in language and lexicon, which, as the friendly neighborhood English nerd on this show, is again part of what makes this kind of compelling to me. It's one of those things, right? So.
And as an educator, when you teach a class and you change a word or two, these are all things students might think you want, right? Like your whole class is coming up with their own creation because they're creating their own knowledge in their own head. So this could also be a visual representation of how, oh, wow, I changed that one word. Now students are thinking this. So it becomes be very careful with what you want. Get very to the point.
Well, it's a very clear and tacit example of the importance of being mindful in your engagement with students, verbally and non-verbally as well, because the representations of that can be as diverse and potentially problematic, if you use a term, as some of these outputs from AI, because I mean, really, all of this stuff is just really at a conceptual level, just metaphor stacked upon metaphor, until from the bottom of the universe to the top, really, as deep and as high as that is. So, well,
so I have 3 things left.
Please do.
Word of the podcast is artificial intelligence.
Good call.
The question of the podcast is, how could educators use AI to help improve student learning opportunities?
Yes.
Because that question is getting asked everywhere. That is the big question right now. So I just ripped it off because everybody's trying to answer those questions.
That'll be a chapter in the Ed Non-Tech book that's coming soon to an academic publisher near you.
Perfect. And the phrase of the podcast, because it was in situ, is AI pivot, because that just tickles me.
You heard it here first. I mean, you
Let's
might
hope.
not have, but you probably did.
We did not mean to rip that off if we ripped it off.
Well, I mean, the essence of good art is, judicious thievery in certain respects. It's like everybody steals. It's just some people steal better than others. So I think that might be a good note to kind of start our denouement on the episode about AI and all of those attendant issues. So thanks as ever, man. I've enjoyed this a lot. Is there anything else we want to kind of bring out here before we close it down?
No, this is it. I'm just happy to be doing it and looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, definitely so. Okay, well, thanks a lot, everybody, and see you around next time.